I was never his wife. Not to his mother, not to his sister, not to anyone in that family, really. To them, I was a placeholder in designer heels, someone to cook, smile, and vanish. I played the part. For 7 years, I nodded through every insult, accepted every lie, and made them think I was weak. Until the day they tried to take everything. They thought I'd sign those papers and disappear, but I had something they didn't. I knew where every dollar was buried. And now, I'm not coming for revenge. I'm coming for ownership. I met Andrew at a hedge fund gala, one of those rooms where men talk over champagne and women are expected to smile like they understand. He was magnetic, polished, and knew how to ask questions that made you feel like you mattered. He didn't care that I came from nothing. At least that's what he said. We married 8 months later. No wedding planner, just his mother and his sister Ivy taking over every detail like I didn't exist. "You're the second wife," his mother whispered as she pinned the veil into my hair. "First wives set the expectations. Second wives learn from mistakes." I never corrected her. I was his only wife. They never looked at me. Not really. To them, I was decorative, silent, a polished ghost in expensive fabric. I had a master's degree in financial architecture. I'd rebuilt fallen firms from bankruptcy to billion-dollar exits. But to the Langford family, I was just Mrs. Andrew, a nameplate on someone else's desk. At dinners, Ivy would smile and say things like, "Camille makes a great salad," then lock eyes with me and add, "And she's excellent at staying quiet." Andrew would chuckle. "That's why I married her," he said once. "She doesn't talk back." So I stopped talking. I became invisible, but only in their eyes. I remembered birthdays, allergies, passwords. I logged every bank account I was asked not to touch. I cataloged conversations, wrote down offhand remarks, 7 years of data, all neatly organized. On our 7th anniversary, Andrew gave me a bracelet. It wasn't my style. It was her style. Tall, blonde, always smiling too wide. Vanessa. I'd seen her name on Andrew's calendar. At first I thought she was a client. Then I saw her name on a wire transfer. $9,700 labeled consulting. Vanessa wasn't a consultant. She was a gift from Ivy, a calculated match. Vanessa was a junior partner at one of the firm's rival companies, a way to strengthen alliances, a woman for optics, bred for luxury, with no inconvenient mind of her own. Ivy once told Andrew, "You need someone who will elevate your brand, not drag it down with her past." That night, I didn't cry. I just filed another piece of data, and I smiled wider than ever. The family meeting came 2 weeks later. They called it a strategic retreat. Ivy, Andrew, and his mother sat around the mahogany table in the lake house, sipping wine older than our marriage. I sat too, like furniture. "We've been thinking," Ivy began, crossing her legs like a lawyer about to pounce. "You've done so well supporting Andrew from the sidelines, but we'd like to streamline the structure of the business." Andrew glanced at me, almost embarrassed. "Just a few paperwork changes. It'll free you from all that legal stuff." His mother smiled like a snake. "You don't want to be bogged down with boring signatures, dear. Let the family handle the family business." They slid a folder toward me. Legal jargon masked behind pastel pink tabs. "Sign here," Ivy said. "It's just procedural." I didn't flinch. I picked up the pen, clicked it once, and smiled. "Of course," I said. "Just one thing." I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila envelope. The seal bore the name of a firm they didn't recognize, one I owned. Inside, the legal formation documents for Langford Holdings, LLC, listed under Camille Langford, sole managing member, dated 4 days after Andrew's father died. Back when they were scrambling to avoid inheritance taxes. Back when Andrew begged me to just put your name here so we can make the transfer easier. They never reversed it. I laid the document flat on the table. Ivy leaned in. Her face lost all color. Andrew reached for it, his hands trembling slightly. His mother didn't move at all. "I don't need to be in your business," I said, "because I own the business." I closed the folder they'd given me and slid it back across the table. Thank you for the offer, but I think I'll hold on to my rights. Andrew opened his mouth to speak, but I stood up before he could. I'll be at the penthouse. Do send someone to pack my things, if they can find them. I walked out of that room lighter than I'd felt in years. Not free yet, but no longer invisible. Not a placeholder. Not Mrs. Andrew. Just Camille. And this time, they were going to remember the name. They thought they broke me that morning. The housekeeper delivered a manila envelope and a note from Andrew. It was written like an apology, but underneath the flowery language was the same message I'd heard for years. Disappear quietly. The terms were simple. I'd sign over my shares in exchange for a payout that barely covered a year's rent in Manhattan. I'd also agree to a permanent NDA. No interviews, no memoirs, no embarrassing revelations about the Langford family. In return, they'd let me walk away with dignity. I walked into the dining room of their estate in Montauk wearing soft clothes, no makeup, hair barely brushed. I held the papers in both hands and shook just enough for Ivy to smirk. Glad to see reason still runs in the family, she said. Andrew wouldn't look at me. His mother folded her arms like she'd won something grand. A hush filled the room as I sat down, hands trembling. I just want peace, I whispered. I signed everything. My pen didn't hesitate. I pushed the papers back across the table, stood up, and let a single tear slide down my cheek. Thank you, I said softly, for letting me go. Ivy leaned back, victorious. You'll get your deposit in 2 business days. I nodded, turned, and walked away. They didn't know I'd already emptied 2 of our joint accounts the night before, legally within my access. Nor did they realize the private equity firm I'd established a year prior under an entirely different name had already begun absorbing minority shares from Langford subsidiaries. I'd used shell entities, offshore intermediaries, and a trail no ordinary accountant could follow. But I wasn't ordinary. I'd built ghost empires for men richer and crueler than Andrew. I wasn't crying because I was heartbroken. I cried because it was the perfect weapon. Nothing disarms a predator like a sobbing target. It makes them overconfident, and overconfidence makes them sloppy. That night, I logged into the private server Andrew thought was encrypted. I'd installed a keystroke tracker 6 months ago, disguised as a calendar plugin he never questioned. I watched as he emailed Vanessa, celebrating the clean break. She signed. No fight at all, he wrote. Idiot never saw it coming. I clicked on the next folder, audio files. Andrew loved surprises, so I gave him 1 year ago, a custom wedding band with a hidden microphone. He thought it was sentimental. I thought it was strategic. Every phone call, every meeting, every whisper he made near that ring was saved to a drive only I could decrypt. 7 years of secrets. One in particular caught my ear. A phone call between Andrew and Ivy, 3 weeks before our anniversary. I want her out, Ivy said. She's holding dead weight. Freeze her out and dump her before Q3. What about the board? He asked. They're scared of bad PR. Make it look mutual. Make her look crazy. The next morning, I bought 3 more shell companies and had them each acquire 2% of Langford's supply chain vendors. Quietly, 1 transaction at a time. Each company listed different CEOs, operated in separate time zones, and filtered money through layered accounts. All roads led back to me. By the end of the week, I controlled 12% of the company's operational infrastructure, and they didn't even know I existed on paper. But I wasn't done. I restructured the trust Andrew had forgotten we created back when we were still in love. It had been built under the assumption that I'd always remain dependent. What he didn't realize was that the trust's bylaws allowed reallocation of assets in the event of fraud or betrayal, 2 boxes he'd enthusiastically checked. So I filed a clause. I transferred key intellectual properties into my name, pending final arbitration, of course. The lawyers would stall. I'd win in silence. They thought I wanted a clean break. I wanted control. I wanted every ounce of power they tried to steal. And now I had the receipts, the assets, the leverage. All I had to do was wait for the right moment. The movers came at dawn. 2 men in black uniforms packed my things into a nondescript truck while the Langford household slept off another evening of champagne and delusion. Ivy peeked from the upstairs window just long enough to smirk. She thought it was over, that I was slinking away in shame. They always underestimated how quietly power can shift hands. I didn't move far, just 2 blocks over, into the penthouse directly facing the Langford estate. I chose it specifically for its view of the family's prized rose garden and the 3rd-floor sunroom where Mother Langford held court. From my new living room, I could see their routines, their guests, their rituals. I tracked patterns like weather systems. It wasn't paranoia, it was war. I needed someone on the inside, and fate handed me the perfect candidate. Maria. She had worked for the Langfords for 12 years before Ivy fired her for incompetence, though we both knew it was because Maria once spoke out when Ivy insulted a delivery boy. I found Maria managing a cafe near Midtown, still wearing the same discreet watch Ivy had given all household staff. Over coffee, I told her the truth, all of it, every betrayal, every lie. I showed her the documents, the audio clips, the contingency plans. Maria listened, then said the words I needed most. "Tell me what you need." We trained for weeks. I set up secure lines, burner phones, encrypted drop boxes. Maria returned to the estate under the pretense of apologizing for her past mistakes. Ivy was too arrogant to question her motives. Within days, I had full visibility of the household again, this time with sharper ears and clearer eyes. 3 months passed. I moved pieces in silence, pulling strings through boardroom votes and proxy decisions. By the time the Langfords planned their annual charity gala, I had a stake in nearly every vendor on their list. It was tradition: black tie, crystal chandeliers, donations from the city's elite. Ivy adored the spotlight. So when the MC announced the surprise presenting sponsor that night, I watched her smile freeze mid-pose. And now we welcome the evening's honorary donor, Ms. Camille Foster. The room turned. I walked in, head held high in a gown the color of fire and a smile made of steel. Murmurs swept through the crowd. Andrew's mouth hung open. His mother paled. I didn't wave. I didn't gloat. I simply took the mic, thanked the attendees for their generosity, and matched the event's donation total, doubling their impact on behalf of those who are often underestimated. When I stepped off stage, Ivy intercepted me near the champagne tower. "Cute stunt," she hissed. "What's your angle?" "No angle," I replied calmly. "Just a little philanthropy. You should try it." That night, their empire began to crack. The following week, I filed the formal documentation disclosing ownership. Camille Foster, managing principal of Helix Capital, which held a controlling 51% stake in Langford Enterprises via 3 silent LLCs tied to the dormant Langford parent company. The legal team confirmed what I'd known for months. The paperwork Andrew asked me to sign years ago had transferred voting control to me indefinitely. Andrew called twice. I didn't answer. Ivy did what Ivy does best. She fought dirty. Days later, anonymous posts appeared online, painting me as a bitter gold digger, a woman with a vendetta, unfit to run any business. They used old photos, quotes out of context, fabrications about my childhood. But they forgot something. I had the tapes. Within 24 hours, I released a clip to a carefully curated journalist, just enough to bait attention. In it, Mother Langford laughed with Ivy about my background, calling me the little mutt who knows how to hold a pen. They laughed at how easily I signed things, joked about replacing me with a model who could keep her mouth shut. The article exploded. Investors panicked. Board members demanded emergency meetings. Stock dipped overnight. And the next morning, the Langford estate gates stayed closed. Inside, I knew they were scrambling, rewriting narratives, looking for exits. But the exits were mine now. I hadn't just taken control. I'd taken the whole board. The boardroom had always been a stage built for men like Andrew, handsome, educated, confident. a room where voices like mine were heard only when we whispered in support. That morning, the room still looked the same. Dark walnut paneling, leather chairs, a view of Manhattan's steel horizon, but the silence was different. It was waiting for me. The special shareholders meeting had been called with one objective: restructure leadership at Langford Enterprises. I had petitioned for it legally with the backing of 51% controlling interest. They couldn't block me. They didn't even try. Andrew walked in 15 minutes late, flanked by Ivy and two attorneys who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. His tie was loose, and his eyes, once full of that familiar, arrogant twinkle, were tired. Ivy tried to sneer, but it looked more like she was chewing glass. I stood at the head of the table and cleared my throat. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "As you know, I've assumed controlling interest. Today, we vote on the removal of Andrew Langford and Ivy Langford from their positions on the executive board." Andrew laughed under his breath. "This is absurd." "Absurd," I repeated, "is using marital connections to shield financial misconduct. Absurd is falsifying company valuations to secure leverage during divorce proceedings. And absurd, Andrew, is thinking I wouldn't notice." I turned to the board. "You've all received the documentation. If anyone has objections, this is the time." No one spoke, not even his former allies, because they'd seen the leaked memos, the falsified numbers, the missing funds hidden in foreign accounts. The vote took 3 minutes. Andrew and Ivy were out. Ivy stood up mid-motion. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "You think investors want some revenge-obsessed woman leading this firm? You're emotional. You're unstable." I met her eyes and smiled. "No, I'm methodical, and I'm legally untouchable." After they left the room, I signed the final paperwork placing interim executives into power, trusted professionals, people with ethics, not bloodlines. It wasn't just about removing them. It was about replacing the culture they'd poisoned. Within 48 hours, I filed charges for breach of fiduciary duty, wire fraud, and conspiracy to defraud shareholders. I wasn't just cleaning house. I was setting fire to the rot they'd built. The court responded quickly. Evidence mounted. Audio files, memos, offshore transfers. Vanessa, Andrew's former mistress, agreed to testify under immunity. The judge ruled that all corporate assets under my legal stewardship were to remain untouched, pending full investigation. Camille Foster was now the sole recognized executive owner of Langford Enterprises. Andrew lost his access. Ivy's bank accounts were frozen. Their mother was issued a subpoena for questioning regarding irregularities in her nonprofit's financial records. I watched it unfold like a symphony, each movement meticulously composed. And as the legal system turned its gaze on them, I turned mine toward the operations they'd corrupted. The first to fall was Ivy's pet project, Lux Interiors, a boutique design firm under Langford's brand. I reviewed its books and found 10 years of inflated invoices, shell partnerships, and 6-figure consulting fees paid to friends and family. I shut it down in a day. Next, Langford Wellness, a vanity project built on pseudoscience and false health claims. I released a public statement disavowing the division, refunded investor deposits, and donated the remaining funds to an actual mental health institute. Each domino dropped with quiet precision. Then came the media storm. Mother Langford's charity, the one she paraded around as a shield of morality, was exposed in a local exposé. Misappropriated funds, faked grant recipients, lavish personal expenses written off as outreach. She denied everything until the wire transfers were made public. "She betrayed us," she said to one reporter, speaking of me. No, I thought. You just finally saw the knife you handed me. Andrew's descent was swift. Within a week, every firm that once returned his calls had blacklisted him. His name landed on 3 private investor no-fly lists. His investment license was suspended pending investigation. His old friends, those men who once toasted to his charm, now ghosted his emails. He went silent after that. No more threats, no more PR damage control, just silence. I walked through the office one morning, my office, and paused by the window. Below, the city pulsed with indifference. The same city that once cheered for Andrew now forgot his name. But they remembered mine. A junior analyst passed me in the hallway and said, "You know, people didn't think you'd survive this." I smiled. I didn't survive it. I designed it. Phoenixes don't survive fire. They are made in it. The office was quiet now. Too quiet. No more emergency board calls, no headlines buzzing with my name, no threats or denials flooding my inbox. Just me, the glass, and the skyline. It should have felt like peace. It didn't. I had won. Every document signed, every verdict cast, every asset reclaimed. The Langfords had been dismantled one by one, their empire left hollow. I'd orchestrated it perfectly, without raising my voice or staining my hands. But now that the war was over, I was left with something I hadn't expected: emptiness. Victory, I learned, is quieter than you think. I stared out the window for hours that first morning, watching taxis move like clockwork through the city streets below. I tried to remember why I had loved Andrew. Was it his confidence, his ambition, or just the way he pretended to see me when no one else did? The answer didn't come. Instead, I found myself opening an old wooden box I hadn't touched in years. Inside was a letter, faded edges, sealed with red wax. My foster mother, Eleanor, had given it to me the night before I married Andrew. "Read it when you forget who you are," she had said. Back then, I laughed. I thought I'd never need it. I broke the seal. "Camille, if you're reading this, then you've already seen the part of life that breaks people. The betrayal, the masks, the hunger for power that devours everything good. I know what you're capable of. You've always been smart enough to burn down kingdoms, but don't become them to destroy them. Build something better." I held the letter like it might disintegrate. I couldn't remember the last time I cried, but in that moment, I felt the tears well, not because of pain, but because of recognition. Somewhere along the line, I had stopped fighting for justice and started chasing obliteration. It wasn't enough to win. I had wanted them to suffer. That realization haunted me, so I began to pull back. I delegated more. I stepped out of meetings. I took long walks. I met with young women in startups and asked what they needed, not what they could give. Slowly, I tried to shift from destroyer to builder. Then came the audit. It was routine, at first. A quarterly review of company history, asset flow, and long-term liabilities. My legal team flagged something odd. A dormant offshore account linked to a property acquired just after Andrew and I married. I didn't remember signing off on it, but the trail pointed back to me. My name, my signature, my funds. I demanded a full forensic review. What unraveled next nearly stopped my heart. 7 years ago, Andrew had transferred nearly $3 million into that account using joint marital assets. But it wasn't just his money, it was mine. Funds I'd brought into the marriage from previous consulting deals, legally protected under prenuptial agreement. The transfer was disguised as a reinvestment initiative, buried beneath fake contracts and offshore shell companies. The deeper we looked, the darker it got. It wasn't just financial fraud, it was laundering. The company Andrew claimed to be investing in? A front, traced back to illegal venture deals linked to his father. The very man I was told died debt-free, a clean legacy. But he hadn't. He'd left behind a web of hidden accounts and phantom corporations, and they'd used me to clean it all. Every paper trail pointed to a single conclusion. Andrew had married me because I was legal cover. A woman with a spotless record, a background in finance, and no surviving family to ask questions. I wasn't a wife. I was a strategy. The final knife came with a transcript, an old voice message Andrew left his mother during our engagement. "She'll make everything clean," he said. "No one will suspect her. She looks like trust." My hands trembled as I deleted the audio, not because I didn't want the evidence, but because I didn't want to hear it again, not even once more. All those years, I thought I was becoming invisible for love. I had been made invisible for profit. They had seen me as nothing but a mirror, one that could reflect whatever they needed to survive. And when I no longer served that purpose, they tried to smash the mirror before it showed them their own rot. But they were wrong. I wasn't just a mirror, I was fire. And now I knew exactly who lit the first match. There comes a moment after the fire when all that's left is smoke. You can keep standing in it, coughing on the ashes of what you've burned, or you can walk out and start again, without the noise, without the applause, without the need to be seen at all. I chose the second. I called a press conference, but not for retaliation. There was no revenge left in me. I stood in front of the same skyline that had once swallowed me whole and made an announcement no one expected. Effective immediately, Langford Enterprises, what remained of it, would be dissolved. The legacy name, the subsidiaries, the ghost companies, gone. In its place, I launched something new, Veritas, a platform for women who had been erased, exploited, and silenced by partners, families, or systems built to strip them of ownership. It wasn't a fund. It wasn't a charity. It was a blueprint for independence. Open-sourced legal tools, anonymous asset protection services, financial education modules for women on the verge of being left with nothing. For those told they signed too fast, too young, too late. For those like me. Within a week, the platform had its first 1,000 users. Within a month, it had 10,000. We didn't just give women back control. We taught them to never lose it again. I'd spent years dismantling someone else's empire. It was time to build one that couldn't be corrupted. And then came the invitation. A TED Talk. At first, I hesitated. I wasn't a speaker. I wasn't charismatic. I didn't want sympathy, and I didn't want spectacle. But something in me, maybe Eleanor's voice again, said yes. The stage was small. The lights, blinding. I stepped up in silence and waited for the room to settle. "My name is Camille Foster," I said, "and for years I was the perfect wife." I smiled. I signed. I disappeared behind a man whose legacy was never his. I thought I was invisible, but the truth is, I was just preparing. I told the story, not the scandal, not the press version, the real one, of what it felt like to be minimized in your own life, of waking up each morning wondering how you lost yourself one compromise at a time, of realizing too late that survival sometimes requires more than silence. It requires strategy. I ended with this. I am not a victim. I am not a villain. I am not a miracle. I am a reminder that power given can be taken, but power built is permanent. The video went viral within 48 hours, 22 million views, and one comment that stopped me cold. I thought she was weak. Now I see she was just preparing. I left the city not long after, sold the penthouse, closed out my social accounts. Quietly, intentionally, I stepped off the grid. I moved to a town no one had ever heard of, where the trees outnumbered people and silence came easy. I bought a house with creaky floors and a wild garden I never managed to tame. It was perfect. Each week, women from all over the country drove up to that house. Some had lost husbands, some had escaped families, some had just lost themselves. We cooked, we talked, we wrote new blueprints. They didn't call me a founder, they called me Camille, and that was enough. One morning, a young woman named Tasha arrived early. She handed me a folder full of papers she was too scared to open alone. Her fiancé had tricked her into signing over 40% of her startup. She hadn't even realized it until the deal was done. I looked her in the eye. "Let's get it back," I said. We spent 2 days unraveling the structure. By Monday, she had her company again. On her way out, she hugged me tight and whispered, "You saved me." I didn't. I just handed her the match and showed her where the fuse was. That night, I sat on the porch as the sun went down, drinking tea and watching the wind pull through the trees. The world I left behind buzzed somewhere in the distance. People still asked where I went, what I'd do next, whether I'd ever return. But I wasn't returning. I was rooted. And maybe that was the most radical move of all.